lean heavy on that CRM and don't necessarily worry about, plugging in tons of integrations.
If you're going to improve your CRM, you're always trying to improve, and you kind of lose sight of like, what do we need? What are wants versus needs, right?
Our goal at Roofr is to offer the best tools possible for the contractor.
And we live, episode 5. Here at the Mission Control Podcast, brought to you by Ascend Digital. I'm your host, Mike Stearns. Today we have Pete with Roofr. Pete, thanks for coming aboard.
How's it going, Mike?
It's going
happy
well.
to be here, man.
Yeah, we're really happy to have you. Very, very excited. Going to be a lot of good stuff contained within this conversation. So, first, for those that don't know, what is Roofr?
Yeah, so Roofr is a all-encompassing sales platform, or moving in that direction. Started out as a measurement tool, first a DIY tool, then a paid measurement tool, similar to some of the others in the industry. We do have both options now, and over the last year and a half or so, we've progressed it a bit further with the addition of a proposal feature that allows you now to take those measurements and roll them straight into a proposal. So now you're, taking the manual measurements that you used to do in the manual proposal writing, or potentially transferring it into your CRM, and you're knocking it out in a matter of minutes. I think most of our guys are using, or are on our subscription plans, are getting their measurements back in less than 3 hours, and it takes probably 2 minutes after that to have a full-blown, really nice proposal, cover sheet, really, really nice looking stuff. A step up, an upgrade definitely from like your bare bones stuff that you would see coming out of most CRMs. With the ability to send that out just in a few minutes. I mean, it's really been fantastic, and it's been very well received.
That's awesome, man. I can imagine how that would make things a lot easier for a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, especially in today's day and age where, time is becoming such a factor in it, right? Not only from a competition standpoint, but from a customer standpoint, right? Customers are definitely looking for this to be a much smoother, quicker process of potentially buying a roof and not having to shop around as much. So, with that, all that going into effect really, and then COVID hitting, and that really like kind of kicking the whole industry in the pants of having to be able to do things more remotely, it's really helped us to excel here, and it be the convenience factor of being able to do it this way really helps, to drive the use of the product for sure.
Yeah, for sure. So have you been with Roofr since day one?
No. So I originally, my background is fairly colorful. I worked on a lot of industries prior to coming into, the home improvement sector. I was a teacher, school teacher. I did a number of different things. And then started out actually doing some part-time work for a guy that was doing production interior trim. So we were doing like trimming houses that were like track houses, right? Like, so it's the same house over and over again. We'd go in, we'd have 8 hours in a day to trim an entire house, myself and a couple other guys, and we would just knock that house out and move on to the next one. And I found that I really liked it. It was tough work, but it was enjoyable, and it was interesting to see how it all came together. And we were working side by side with other contractors. The roofers were there. The driveway guys over there a lot of times at the same time as us, and how everybody was contingent on the guy before them. So like how successful our day went, determined how successful the rest of the guys that were needed to finish out that house potentially could be. So it was an interesting, line of business to be in for me. And so I eventually started doing it full time, and then ended up becoming a GC and actually working as a GC down in Florida, doing a bunch of stuff, home remodels, historical restorations. We're in one of the older cities in the United States down there, and doing a lot of historical restoration work on some homes from like the early 1900s, 1800s in that area. So that was kind of cool. That was really one of my favorite things to do. And then moved from Florida up to Jersey, and found a home at a CRM here, and that was really my transition from the field side of it to the actual SaaS side of the business and the tech side of the business, and moved into the office at that point. So kind of nice being able to have that field experience and be able to translate it, for the contractors. Once I got on the tech side, it was a really beneficial way to do it. So I worked for a couple of years with the CRM, and then came over to Roofr about a year and a half ago. To run partnerships with them and help them get the ball rolling on a number of different other projects as well.
So you had a partnerships, correct?
Yes, head of partnerships, and also work with the product team a lot on like market strategy and product strategies. So do a lot of that
awesome.
on the side.
So we're going to do a little bit of jumping around because you said a lot there, and there's a lot of things that I want to touch on. So
Yeah,
you were a
absolutely.
school teacher.
I was started out as a high school English teacher, and then I actually transitioned from there into special education and worked specifically with special ed students and eventually specifically with autistic students. Spent a number of years doing that, and then went into manufacturing after that. Moved from Georgia to Florida and hooked up and got into boat manufacturing just kind of on a whim. It was just kind of a funny coincidence, and ended up working in that for a number of years, and then went into construction from there.
Awesome. So what inspired the transition out of education into manufacturing?
It was really looking back. It's interesting. At the time, it was money driven. I mean, financially, being a teacher in the South where I was not a very lucrative thing to be involved in. It was, you weren't making a lot of money. And, there was an opportunity presented to me to make considerably more than I was making. And and working with the kids that I was working with, it is very mentally taxing. And I was kind of getting to the point of almost being a little burned out, I think, and looking for a change anyway. And obviously something more lucrative came up, and that's how I transitioned out of that. I still think at the heart of it, my calling and what I really do enjoy is teaching. And I think that's one of the reasons why even coming to the SaaS side of the business, I love being part of like customer success and, the podcast into things and webinars, all that kind of stuff. Cause I still at the core of it, I still love to teach, right? It may not be teaching in an actual school, but I'm still having the ability to work with these contractors and educate them and be able to maybe show them a better way or a more effective way to run the business. So loving that piece of it, that's is something that I think will always be a big part of me for sure.
Yeah, I get it. There's something very fulfilling about watching the light bulb go off, like when you explain something to somebody, right? And they get it.
Yeah.
I've been on both sides of it, and I feel the same way. Although I'm not a teacher, I've taught people some things, and that's awesome. So you then pivoted into the CRM side of things, you said, right?
Yes. Yep.
How important is it for a contractor to have a CRM?
I think that it is extremely important. Like, and one of the things we used to say over there at the CRM is there's going to come a day where you won't be able to be a dog walker without having a CRM, right? Because it's going to be the only way to really organize your business and be streamlined enough to be timely in what you do. Like you could still keep track of things in a notebook or on, sheets of paper or manila folders, however you wanted to do it. But is it truly going to be the most effective, streamlined, fastest way to do things? And I think that's what people are ultimately starting to realize is having these digital tools is more convenient, but it's also becomes a necessity because it speeds everything up and it keeps you more organized and it makes it easier to access the information from anywhere. It's not a situation now where I'm having to like call back to the office to get info. I can access it on the, out in the field, on the road or wherever I'm at. And it makes a huge difference, right? It's so ultimately, I think at the end of the day, a CRM or something like that is going to become the heart of every business, regardless of whether you're a contractor or a dog walker or whatever the case may be. You're going to need something to keep track of your customer base and really know where everybody's at in the process. So, I do think there is a time when you first start out as a roofer that it's probably not the very first thing you want to spend your money on. Like you could actually do some other things that are more effective for the business than dump a ton of change into a CRM. If it's just you or maybe you and one other person, you're not managing a huge work, a huge load of customers, a huge load of projects. You don't necessarily need to have this full blown CRM, but within the first couple of years, I'd say of business, you're going to definitely want to look down that road and figure out what CRM would fit you best.
Yeah, those are some really good points, especially the accessibility. So if you have a customer, right, that calls into the office and they call in for a sales rep or for a project manager, and then, maybe the admin then lets the project manager know, hey, this person's going to be calling you. Now he has access to their file, and he can have a very structured and intelligent conversation. There's nothing more disheartening than when you talk to a company that's handling something for you and they don't know where something's at. They don't have answers, right? You feel very unimportant to them.
Yeah.
And you begin to lose confidence in what they're doing or what they're going to be doing for you, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think what we used to see a lot of times when I was there at the CRM is that you'd get these people who have a process, right? Like maybe I'm a guy who's been doing this 15, 20 years. I have a process, but it's essentially all in my head, right? And then I'm essentially getting mad at my employees for not following the process, but really it's never been put down on paper, right? So nobody really truly understands the process. And what the CRM does, it allows you to take that process and put it in a way that now everyone can visually see the process and understand how it flows, understand the steps involved, understand the pieces that are important, the pieces of information that we gather, the things we want to check off the list, and it's visible for everybody, right? So now it's not relying on that one person who, may be the only guy that estimates, or maybe the only guy that knows how to, build a takeoff and order material, right? Like, you get away from having that one person that the whole entire company is contingent on, and now you allow everybody else to grow as employees. You allow them to figure out their piece, and it just allows you to be able to relay that to everybody much easier, and it also allows a lot of these guys to realize that maybe at the heart of it, they don't necessarily even have a process that they understand, right? When you have to translate that process from your head, what you think you've got dialed in, and you got to put it down for someone else to relate to it, a lot of times you go, shit, like I don't even know if I know this process, or maybe you realize there's pieces of the process that are broken, right? And now you can find ways to fix them. So I think it's a great exercise to go through anyway, because even for the guys that are very experienced and feel as though they're running very successful businesses, maybe you've been in business for a long time and, you feel very comfortable with the money you're making and the way jobs are getting done. But when you start to really look at that process and put it on paper, you'll be amazed at how many holes you'll find in it, or log jams, like things where, jobs are bottlenecking, for instance, like I used to always love to look at these contractors' workflows and when I was in the CRM and see their follow-up stage. How many times are we submitting a contract to a customer and then never truly following up with that customer to find out whether it's a yes or a no? And we get this huge bottleneck. And I always loved to change it from a quantity to a dollar figure, so that they could see in dollars how much was tied up in proposals that were outstanding, that just didn't have an answer, right? And so, little things like that probably get overlooked when you're just, it's kind of all in your head, or you're just relaying it verbally to someone versus, okay, here's a visual look at what we're doing every day and where all our jobs are sitting. And wait, we've got a huge bottleneck at follow-up, or we've got a huge bottleneck at invoicing that we're, for some reason, not getting invoices closed fast enough, right? Like, so all these things become very apparent when you can visually see it, right? And that's what I always loved about the CRM.
Yeah, that's brilliant because, and you can find, most importantly, you can find this information in seconds, right? It's keystrokes, right? You can, search by any multiple filters that you want to find the exact information that you need to hold people accountable, to coach them, to really figure out where your numbers are at, to figure out where all your leads came from. Yeah. Right? And what the profitability were on those different lead channels, and see which sales reps are hitting the required margins and which ones are not. And, if you know that sales rep A missed their margins last month, but it was a one-off, he's been with us for 2 years, things can happen, right? But if you realize that same rep missed the required margin on his jobs 3 months in a row on every single job, you've got a much bigger problem. And with the absence of data, you would never know that. Yeah. And to your point, Pete, if it's all up here, right, we're never going to get to the point. We're going to remember the last job or two maybe, and then there's some recency bias there. But to be able to paint an entire picture and make sound decisions based off of a large enough sample size of where it really matters, the CRM makes your life exponentially easier. So I couldn't agree with you more.
Well, and I love the fact that you brought up the accountability factor, because that was a huge one for a lot of contractors when they would come to us from, let's say, we used to say, coming from pen and paper to the digital side. that was a big one because they were like, there's no real way for me to hold these guys accountable to know, are they quoting the same way I'm quoting? Like there's no standardizing anything. Everything's very objective when you're doing it the pen and paper way. And there's no way to really truly know, like, are these guys following up like they should? Are they getting things out in a timely manner? I can't really track that stuff if I can't visually see it myself. So, you struggle a lot to keep people accountable when you're just manually doing everything, right? When you get into a situation where all that stuff's visible across the company, it's very easy to hold people accountable because like you said, I can see it almost instantly now. I know who's performing, who's getting quotes out in a timely manner, who's following up on their customers, how that's working to help them convert. Like all that stuff is so easy to find and so visual now that it's a huge piece for like the owner of a company or a sales manager or a production manager to be able to see that stuff at a glance now, as opposed to, having to dig for information or potentially even take somebody's word for it.
Yeah, that it couldn't be more true. And I think it's also important to mention, guys, that the CRM is only going to be as good as you make it, right? Garbage in, garbage out. If you're not holding your team accountable, okay, so let's back up for a minute. Nobody is going to enjoy implementing a CRM or transitioning to a new CRM. I promise you, I've seen it all too many times. They're going to kick and scream. So I think that there has to be a way that the leader rolls it out to show people the benefit of it, not just do it because I said so. And I think that it's really important to hold them accountable and making sure that, in the early adoption of that CRM, that you're making sure that people understand why it's being used and make sure that they're doing it. Because if you could roll out the best CRM with all the bells and whistles, and that's fantastic. But at the end of the day, if people aren't using it, not only are you not going to get the data you need, you're going to make decisions off of incomplete data, which can be very dangerous.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely. And I think, along those lines, one of the things that I would say to people when you're looking for a CRM, one of the things that I used to try to stress to these guys is find a CRM that fits the way you're doing business, right? Like don't necessarily try to adjust your business to fit the CRM, because you're going to get way more adoption from your team if you can pretty much maintain the same level of doing things and just show them how the CRM is going to make it maybe easier, quicker, more streamlined, more organized, right? But we're still quoting the same way. We're still approaching customers the same way, as opposed to, hey guys, this is how we used to do it. Now we're implementing a CRM and we're going to completely change the way we do business, right? I can guarantee you that you're going to hit nothing but friction if you do it that way, from your sales team, from your production team, right? Everybody's going to be like, why are we changing something that works to something that in their mind is going to look like we're adding more steps to the process, right? And it's going to be a lot harder to show them value in that than to say like, hey, we're going to just make a ton of stuff that we're currently doing more digital so that it's quicker, more streamlined, easier for you guys to do. And that's ultimately how you can get a CRM adopted internally, way better, way quicker. And, your guys will see the value in it much faster that way.
Yeah, that's smart, Pete. Really good points. In your experience, what is the typical time that it takes to get everyone through the initial learning curve and functioning on the new CRM for those that are considering moving into a new platform or adopting one?
Yeah, so I think the biggest, I think if you're talking about time itself, I think you're looking at, I would give yourself 30 days, right? I give yourself 30 days to get it set up, and that's with a person playing point, right? And taking the time to really like get in there, probably on a daily basis, at least for the first 2 weeks. Get your workflow set up. Get anything loaded that you need loaded. Like if you're coming from another CRM, right, you're going to probably want to load your contacts and all that, maybe some job info, stuff like that. So you want to get that stuff in there next, and then, one or two times of maybe, I always told people, if you're in a CRM that has a custom workflow, right, expect to tweak your workflow probably 2 or 3 times before you finally land on a workflow that you like. Because what I always found is that everyone overshoots in the beginning and they put too much stuff in the workflow, right? Things that aren't necessarily at the root of it, workflow items, right? Like you got to think of your workflow as being very high level. And I think a lot of people try to get too overly detailed there and it clutters things, right? And the idea of this is to streamline it and make things run more efficiently for you. And there's always ways in other CRMs to capture that information, but is it ultimately at the end of the day something that I need to see on like a main dashboard screen? And that's what you got to think about, right? If it's high level enough and important enough that I need to be able to see it at a glance when I log into my CRM, then yeah, I probably want it in my workflow. But if it's something that is going to potentially affect one of those factors, then it's probably not a workflow item. It's just, contingent. It's something that's going to feed into one of those workflow items, like invoicing, right? Like, do I need to have an invoice sent and an invoice signed and, all these different things, or proposals? Like, do I need to have a workflow item for, we got a permit, we, ordered a dumpster? Like, those things are kind of, in my mind, they're contingent on kind of a pre-production stage, but they're not necessarily, worthy of their own workflow item potentially, right? So I think these are things that happen when people first get into a CRM, is they're like, man, well, let's just put everything in there, right? And then you end up with you see these workflows that are like 50 items long, and you're like, Jesus, like, people are going to get lost in there, right? Like, if I turned my team loose in there, it's going to be confusing as hell, right? To even figure out where I'm at, as opposed to something that's maybe clean, 8 items, right? That kind of are at the heart of what we're looking to accomplish every day, and the main stages that a job passes through, and it's a much cleaner view for everybody. So, just some things to keep in mind there. And I think that once you kind of get those dialed in and you get like that basic information in there, then you're ready to start running jobs, and my thing is, what I always loved to do with contractors when we were training them at the CRM level was, hey, take a job that you guys did a month ago, let's say 2 weeks ago, right? Put it in there and run it through the process, because you've already taken it through your process, and see how closely your new process that you've put into your CRM mimics what you guys would normally do, and then tweak it again, right? And make sure that it fits as close as possible to what you guys did 2 weeks ago before you had a CRM, right? So you want that job to flow as similar as you can to what you were doing prior to using the CRM. So that way, when I take it to my team, I'm like, look, everything's going to stay the same. All you're going to do is you're going to put the information here rather than writing it on a piece of paper and handing it to the office manager, or sticking it in an envelope that you pass to someone else, right? Like, this essentially just becomes a digital version of what we're already doing. And I think it's a much easier sell that way, but getting it set up initially, like I said, I think 30 days is a solid time frame to give yourself to get that initial setup done. And then, I think depending on how clean you guys are, it's set up, and how well the process is fine tuned, it may take 2 days to get your sales team and your production team up to speed. It may take 2 weeks, right? You got to take into account how big your team is, and how, how much time it's going to take to corral everybody and teach them. And, but yeah, I mean, at that point, it's a lot easier to get that portion of it done than it is to, turn everybody loose in a CRM that's not loaded up and ready to go. So that would be my biggest word of advice for someone.
And that's really good advice, because I've seen it as well. And it's almost a paradox, because you're onboarding with this CRM to make things easier, right? To make things run more efficiently, make sure everyone's on the same page, less disconnect, and you're hoping that it's going to, make you more profitable, make people's lives easier, and make your customers happier, right? And if you, as Pete mentioned, if you inundate the process early on and then try to roll it out, there's a very good chance that kicking and screaming that we talked about earlier on from like the sales reps and your office team, it becomes much more abundant, because people are naturally going to become overwhelmed. And so over-optimizing it or overdoing it at the onset, I agree with you wholeheartedly, Pete, I think it's a misstep. And maybe it's something where you go with more of a minimal viable product concept and iron out exactly, in essence, we have 6 steps in our customer life cycle, and these are the 6 steps, right? And this is what should be contained within. And maybe you don't make it entirely detail-oriented to where, as you get in there and your team starts becoming comfortable using it, you make those small changes, and incremental change is an effective way to make an impact. I'm sure there's some studies out there that support it. I haven't read them, but in my experience, when you move things along slowly, people tend to be much more inclined to accept that change than if you make a drastic change. Which, again, I'm implementing a new CRM right now personally for my business, and it's awful. We're not going to sugarcoat it here, right? And
No, it is. It's an awful
and no
thing.
matter how much time and energy you put into it, and to your point, Pete, you have a point person that's working on these things, you have to understand as well, it's not going to be perfect when you launch it. So don't get discouraged if you figure out that you have to tweak some things as time goes on, because there's going to be things that you didn't think of. Scenarios are naturally going to present themselves within your business that you don't have an answer for, with where this fits in the CRM and how we document it, how do we deal with these things. But like that, I think that would be something really nice to be able to address in like a meeting with your team in the early adoption stages of a CRM, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and another point that I'd like to make here is you got to realize too, like a lot of times, like let's say I'm coming from pen and paper, right? And I'm coming to a CRM. They have some of these CRMs have a ton of features, right? Like a ton of bells and whistles. You're talking about like automated communications and, communications with my subcontractors and tons of things that we can do inside this CRM. And I think one of the main mistakes that's made a lot of times too, to your point of being overwhelming, is that you try to do too many of those things right away, right? Like what I always say is like, let's get the team using it first, like at the most basic level. Yes. Like let's get them plugging leads into it and maybe creating their estimates in there or something along those lines, right? Something just very basic functionality. And then once everybody seems comfortable with that and that's kind of flowing in the CRM, right? Like we can easily find customer info, then let's worry about creating automated communications out to those to those customers, or going a step further and ordering our materials in there or creating invoices in there, right? Like we don't necessarily have to take on the entire workflow on day one, right? Like we don't have to have email templates loaded in there and all this other, custom contracts created and all these things like on the first week that we have a CRM, right? And I think, to your point, like not only does it become overwhelming for the team, but when you try to do all this stuff right off the bat, you actually render the thing like useless, right? Like you create this CRM scenario where the CRM is going to fail because the information is not all there. No one knows how to use it correctly. There's way too many things so that everybody gets overwhelmed, so they just don't do anything with it, right? And then what happens? 3 months down the line, the owner of the company gets his bill and he's like, I'm paying for this. We're not even using it. Like what the hell is going on here, right? I'm paying a couple $100 a month and nobody even puts the first lead in this thing, right? And then it's like, now I want to cancel. Now I got to move all my information again to another CRM because that one's completely ineffective. And the thing is that none of these CRMs are completely ineffective. It's all in how they're set up and how they're, implemented, right? And that's where the challenge comes. And if you can do it correctly from the beginning and not bite off more than you can chew, and not just flood it with people or flood it with information that, like you said, is garbage potentially, right? Like that's the other thing. You just want to put like everything that's ever happened with the company and the history of it since day one into this CRM. Like how important really is all that information, right? Do we need to know a customer that we put a roof on his house 15 years ago? Like, is that really something that has to be in our CRM right now? Or is it something that potentially we could reference someplace else, and be comfortable doing that? So, that type of stuff is things you need to think about, because it's all information that's going to just clutter that CRM right from the beginning and make it very hard to use and implement, and potentially be the downfall of it, right? So, I like to take kind of that step approach of like, hey, let's master one or two things out of our workflow in this CRM, and then let's add another one. Like let's wait and add production, right? Like we can do production without it. We have been doing it without it. So let's get our sales guys acclimated in there. And then once they're cool with it and they're flowing and they're like, man, this thing is jamming, it's awesome, then we bring the production guys in and we let the production guys learn their piece. And then we slowly implement it across the team, right? Then the office manager comes in and starts handling their part so they feel comfortable with, using it to get referrals or managing lead sources or whatever the case they're going to be, what they're going to do with it. So, I think that that's a huge thing that I saw is like, if the teams that were like, okay, let's just do the basics and add all the bells and whistles later, versus the team that was like, let's just do it, right? Like I'm all in, let's just get it all going. And those are the guys that tended to be a little bit more ineffective because there's just too much, right? Yeah. It's too much to figure out. It makes the whole setup process and training process way more complicated than it needs to be. And it more or less like sets you up for failure, I think,
Yeah, that's again, you've seen it. I've seen it. It's a tough situation to stand by and watch, right?
Yeah.
Because these things, they take time, they take money, and it requires a lot of effort from a lot of people in order to get them moving in the right direction. But I'll tell you what, once you get there, when you get your sales reps documenting things, you get your office staff, you get your fulfillment team or your crews, and you've got great technologies that sync with these CRMs and can streamline and help you make you guys more effective and productive. It's a beautiful thing to see, and it's incredibly helpful when it comes to everybody within your company. So get a CRM, listen to everything that Pete said, because he's spot on everything. It's going to be fantastic. Don't you worry. So
yeah, I mean, one of the things to note is like, I think once you get to your point, once you get that CRM set up and everybody's using it and using it correctly, they're never going back, right? Like they'll be like, I can't believe we didn't do this. Like we used to hear it all the time. I can't believe I didn't do this 5 years ago. Like what a difference it would have made in my business. I could have scaled so much faster, or I could have hired so many more people or closed so many more jobs, right? Because ultimately, at the end of the day, it will make you better. Like it is going to make you better, in whatever piece you want to do. Whether it's you want to add more time to your day, whether you want to add more time so you can sell more jobs, whether you just want to have a cleaner transition from sales to production. Sure. It's going to help with all that stuff. And at the end of the day, you're never going to want to go back, right? And neither is your team once they really adopt it and realize the value in it. So, that's why setting it up correctly and getting them to buy into it as early as possible is so important, because ultimately once they see it and they realize how much it's going to impact their day, they're never going to want to go back to the old way of doing it.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. So we're going to do one more question on CRMs. So what are your favorite integrations that have helped roofers when it comes to CRMs?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, it really depends. I think that from a roofing standpoint, right? If I was a brand new roofer, I would lean heavy on my CRM, right? Like if I was maybe a small company, like I'm not looking to be super fancy and employ, 7 different, platforms and pay a ton of money for tech at this point. So I would lean heavy on the tools that are in my CRM, right? Like there's an estimating feature in most of them. Is it the greatest estimating feature out there on the market? Not necessarily, but does it do the job? 100%, right? Like I can quote just as fine out of there as I can quote out of something else. Ultimately, there may come a day where I want something that looks better, feels better, is more efficient. But to start out, there's nothing wrong with quoting out of that CRM, right? There's nothing wrong with invoicing out of that CRM. Like, is it great to have QuickBooks and, have a fancy system like Sage or something like that? Yeah, ultimately you may want that. But in the beginning, lean heavy on that CRM and don't necessarily worry about, plugging in tons of integrations. But when the time comes, I think you'll see it in your workflow and you'll kind of know like, okay, like here's, and that's why I think the CRM is so important too, because you'll see those areas of opportunity very, very easily once you get a CRM in place, right? And you're looking at that workflow every day and all of a sudden you realize nobody's following up the way they should. What if we were able to automate that follow-up so it was way cleaner and I didn't have to rely on these boneheads I have doing sales to follow up because none of them are doing it, right? So it's like, like rather than trusting my guys, maybe I can just make their day easier and make my life easier by automating follow-up. Okay, great. Then let's go find a platform that does that, right? And we plug that in. And now all of a sudden you're using that CRM in a whole different way because it's becoming this hub where I can fill the holes that are in my CRM, right? Like I can fill the holes that my team is still experiencing, even though we came to a CRM. Ultimately our workflow is still the same as it was before. We just digitized it, right? So the holes are still there. They're just way more obvious now because it's much more visible to everybody. So then you take these other platforms that specialize in these things and you plug them in to kind of plug those holes, right? Mm-hmm. Automated communication, I think, is a great one, especially in today's day and age. We talk often about speed to lead, right? Like when there's so much competition and so many customers are coming now from like, social sources and things like that. They're not really keen on getting like a a big dog and pony show in their house anymore, right? Like they want to just be communicated with, via text or via email or whatever the case may be. So having the ability to automate that and get on them right away and be super responsive and constantly in communication with that customer is going to be huge to the success of landing jobs, right? So I love the automated communication platforms. There's a couple of really good ones in the industry, and I think that any of those are a great addition to a CRM. Like I said, once you get to a certain point, I think a quoting tool can definitely help, right? I think that, it's a way to stand out from the competition. If you're in a market where you've got a lot of guys that have adopted CRMs, a lot of them are probably quoting out of that CRM, right? So what happens is you get this like cookie cutter idea of like, hey, I've got, I'm a homeowner in Texas and I just had a hail. I'm probably getting 10 or 12 people that want to quote my job. And 10 of those, 12 estimates that I got look identical because they came out of the CRM, or very similar because they came out of similar CRMs, right? It's like, how do I stand out from the crowd? I go with something different, right? I go to another another estimating tool that can easily communicate with my CRM, but maybe gives me some more bells and whistles and gives me the ability to, to stand out from the crowd a little bit. And those are great for guys that are in like really competitive markets, Texas, Florida, right? Like where you really are up against the wall kind of to stand out from the crowd, and you want to get to guys, you want to get to people fast, but you also want to, be the one that they're gauging everybody else's proposal off of. It's a great way to do it is to get one of those specialized estimating platforms and plug it in, right? And then, of course, I think the measurement tools are one that have grown over time. I think there was a time where that was considered a luxury, and I don't think it is anymore. I think just for the sheer speed of getting to customers and the remote capabilities of it, and just what it does for a time saving. Like right before we got on this podcast, I was talking to a guy who does metal roofs who said like, man, I need something so badly for metal roofing because I'm up on a roof for 2.5 hours in the blazing sun, sweating my ass off, measuring literally every piece of metal roof that I'm going to put on so that I can literally hand draw a diagram and tell my guys, this is how you install it. He's like, and it's so time consuming. And it's just, he said, it over the course of the week, I'm wasting so much time and effort, and I'm blazing in the sun. I'm up on the roof. He's like, I got a company to run. Like I'm the only one that can accurately quote a metal roof, and it's killing me because there's so many other things I could be doing as the owner of the company that I'm stuck doing this, right? And it's like, so those types of things are what those remote measurement tools have really helped to solve. So I think that they've definitely become more cost effective, right? There's a number of them now that are way more cost effective than they used to be. So it allows you now to get in earlier. You don't have to be someone who's churning and burning a ton of jobs to be able to use one. Where if I'm a smaller guy, I'm having to still climb the ladder and maybe not even compete with the bigger guy because of the amount of time it takes me to get a quote out the door. Now I can compete and get a quote out the door in the same time or even less than maybe the bigger company does. So, I think those are some great ones. Anything that can help you funnel leads in, I think are going to help. One thing that a lot of people don't realize is your CRM starts when you put a lead into it, right? So where do the leads come from? And I think that's a challenge that roofers always struggle with. So anything that you can do to funnel those leads into that CRM, or it's always going to help you, because otherwise you're just, counting on whatever, word of mouth or whatever the case may be to get leads in the door, because that's one of the biggest things. None of your CRMs really have any kind of marketing or front end funnel capabilities. So it really starts at the entry of that lead into that system. So where is that coming from, and how is it funneling into my CRM, right? So like you said, being able to track lead sources in that CRM is huge, so that I can see where my money is best spent and stuff like that. But you still got to have those sources of leads coming in and how you're generating them. So, those are some things that I think have over time become crucial tools. But, if you're new to CRMs, like if I'm a brand new roofer or a very small company and I'm like, hey, I'm going to just get on a CRM because I know it's going to be a way to streamline my business, lean heavy on the CRM in the beginning, right? Like just use the CRM, and then you'll see where you need to employ the other, pieces of tech and what tech, find the one that just works best to plug that hole. Right. So, and I think that's the easiest way to do it. I mean, there's some fantastic softwares out there right now that are very specialized in a lot of things. and really have their niches covered and just find the one that works best for you.
Yeah, that's very insightful, because I think that, again, you're always kind of fighting against yourself to want to, like, if you're going to improve your CRM, you're always trying to improve, and you kind of lose sight of, like, what do we need? What are wants versus needs, right?
Yeah.
And, I think I rein myself in on this stuff all the time, not with just the CRM, right? Like, needs and wants, right? I don't really need that. I just want it. All right.
Yeah.
And sometimes you'll acquiesce to the wants, and sometimes, like, you should really stick to the needs. I'm not here to tell you how to run your life, but I think that's a really good point when you're moving into or evolving within your CRM. Lean on it heavy, get as much out of it as you can. That kind of piggybacks off of finding one that fits the needs of your business, specifically in what your process is, and not reinventing your process to fit the CRM. So, yeah, dude, really good stuff. So you started speaking my love language there for a minute when you said speed to lead, right? Like, it's such a good point, because speed to lead is a real thing, especially, if you're doing things like Facebook advertising or even Google advertising, any type of advertising. The longer it takes for an individual to get somebody live, the more time they have to search elsewhere for it, right? And when you're spending money, you don't want to give people the opportunity to choose somebody else. And I think, what you said as far as, like, the automated communication, like, that's absolutely huge. And, like, another spoke of value that it has is kind of nurturing that relationship. If you think of, like, these big companies, think of Amazon, right? Which I'm kind of pissed, because I had a whiteboard that was supposed to be delivered yesterday, then this morning, then at noon, and here we are at 3:17 p.m. Eastern Standard. It's still not here.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy as you get old what you start to get excited about, right?
Right.
Goddamn whiteboard. I'm super amped for it, and it's still not here, and I'm kind of pissed. But, they typically, there's exceptions to every rule, they'll typically give you step-by-step guidance, and there's so many touches within that life cycle of you deciding add to cart or buy now to the time that it gets delivered at your doorstep. Like, hey, guess what, Mike? Your whiteboard's 10 stops away, and let's go.
Yeah.
Right? So you're building that rapport with the customer and giving them an experience that I don't want to say it can't be matched, but why would they ever want to go astray from that company that provided them that experience, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, that's a great point is, one of the things that we would find most of the time, even when we were on the CRM side of it, and we're working with contractors, the contractors were the same way. Like, one of the biggest things that would draw them to a product like ours was that, not to go back to the CRM, but, it was the communication factor. Like, can I pick up the phone and call somebody and get some help? And so many times it was the same way with the contractor to the customer relationship is, like you said, can I call the office if I can't get in touch with my sales rep, and the office can look it up and say, yeah, I can, give me 5 minutes and I can figure out exactly what's going on with your job. Let me just look you up, and I can see exactly where you're at in the workflow. I can see exactly what's going on. Oh, we're waiting on a permit. Oh, we're waiting on a material drop, whatever the case may be. Oh, your material's scheduled to drop on Thursday. We're going to be there Friday to do the job. Oh, wow, that's great. Thanks, and I think that, the communication factor is so crucial, and especially in today's day and age, because people are busy and they're not just like hanging out waiting for you to show up. So, I remember seeing this thing that said, now we're getting into more of millennial buyers, and the millennial buyers, it said 44% of them want a contactless sales process, right? Like, they don't even want to talk to a person face to face. So they just want updates via text, via email, whatever the case may be. Hey, here's where we stand, hey, we're a week out from doing your job. We're 2 weeks out from doing your job. Okay, cool. As long as I know what's going on, then I'm not calling you all pissed off, right? And it's when there's no communication that I'm just like you said, I'm going elsewhere. Or, hey, I hit these guys up 2 days ago and I still haven't even heard from anybody at that company, as opposed to an automated message going out as soon as I click the submit button. I got an email that says, like, hey, thanks for reaching out. We're going to be in touch shortly to schedule an appointment. Whoa, shit, these guys they're on top of their stuff, right? Like, right. Man, this is awesome, right? So it sets that tone, like, from the very beginning, that you're like, wow, these guys obviously have their shit together, right? They're organized, right? They're already on top of it, and then, how quickly that rep reaches out and all that kind of stuff. It just, like you said, it fosters that relationship of like, man, these guys, before you've even gotten to the job, you've won future business with them because they're like, these guys are all over it. I love them. You know what I mean? As opposed to, like you said, I'm sending, potentially hitting a guy up about coming out, takes him a week to respond, takes him another week to come out and actually do the estimate. And then, or he does an inspection and then, then I don't hear from him. Like I always use this story, like my neighbor was getting central air put in his house and he had a guy come, quote him a whole system, like walk through the house, with the pen and pad and the whole, super official looking, like, oh, you're going to need this, you're going to need this, right? So like 4 days later, I said to him, what did that guy quote you? Oh, I still don't have a quote from him. I said, don't do business with him. And he's like, well, what do you mean? I said, in today's day and age, if it still takes him a week to get you a quote, then how long is it going to take him to actually come and do your job? Right? He may be the best guy out there, but he's not organized because he has all the tools available to him right now to be able to turn that quote around in his truck before he leaves your driveway. And he's choosing not to use them, which means that that's probably not the only part of his business that's inefficient. Right? And the odds are that he's going to quote you, you're going to say yes, and then it's going to be a month before he shows up to actually put HVAC into your house, and it's going to be the winter time, and you needed air conditioning the whole time, and you got totally screwed because he's doesn't have his shit together, right? As opposed to the guy who literally says, yeah, give me a second, goes outside to his truck, uses his CRM or whatever other tech he has, pops out an estimate and says, hey, look, we may find some unforeseen stuff, but here's a number, right? Like this is what's going to cost you, for me to do it. Oh, and by the way, if you sign today, I can be here a week from now and we can knock this thing out, right? Like I can fit you into the schedule. That's a whole different experience, right? It's like night and day, right? And I think that that's where we're moving in that direction. I think not everybody's moving in that direction, and that's what's going to determine who's successful in these home improvement businesses and who's not, right? Because those are the type of way that's the type of industry we live in now. Like we live in an Amazon world where I can see what's, that my package is 10 packages away, or I can find out exactly where it's scanned this morning, or I can go on and order anything that I could possibly ever want in my life just by searching it on Amazon, right? And I think that, that's the expectation now, right? Is that oh crap, I need a roof. Let me look it up, find a roofer near me, and I should be able to get a roof by the end of the week, right? Like I can get something on Amazon in a day and a half. I order it and it's already out shipped before the day's over, right? So, and I think that's the idea we're going to have to move more and more towards, in home improvement. You're not going to be able to have these like drastically long lead times, and I'm not going to be able to take my sweet time going back to the office and typing you up a Microsoft Word document of, what I'm going to do. And you know what I mean? Like those days are gone, and I think that if you're dealing as a customer, if you're a customer listening to this and you're dealing with a contractor and that's the way he's operating, he's choosing not to do it the more efficient way, right? Because all the tools are available for them and they're not cost prohibitive anymore. Like there's ways, you could literally use products for free to do these things, right? At this point in the industry. So, he's making a conscious effort not to be more streamlined and be more efficient, and it's going to make him not competitive eventually.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And it's like, I don't know if you've, right now, I would assume they're in the minority between the age of 20 and 28, 29 that are buying houses, right? Probably as you move up that spectrum, it becomes more likely they're going to purchase a home. But like you said, the immediate gratification thing, and as that correlates to the younger demographic where it's like, guess what? You may not give a shit about them now, but 5 years from now, they might be, the mainstay of your target market, or a very good percentage of it.
Absolutely.
Just like, people would shit on millennials and like, dude, I get it, millennials suck. I'm a millennial, whatever. But guess who raised us? So that's where we're at is, you have the millennials that are they're a big part of your target audience. You have to understand that, the generation behind us, they're not far behind, and you have to accommodate them. For sure, if you want to service them and if you want to thrive in your market, they're going to be a big part of it, right? So you had mentioned
Absolutely.
Something about the luxury, right, that it used to be able to use measurement softwares, right? Yeah, that's I like how you position that, because that's, I mean, if you think about some of the measurements, like how often can a small business afford to pay 30, 40 or $50 for one quote that they don't even know that they got? I mean, that is taxing to a small business. And I love the humility, because you didn't mention names, but I'll say it, right? So Roofr, you guys disrupted the industry. If I'm trying to look at this objectively, and I said this years ago, like when I first heard of it, as far as how you guys kind of cornered the market from the accessibility side of things, right? You made it so much more affordable, which is a big part of any equation when you're running a business. Like, yes, I want this, but it doesn't make sense financially. Like, you guys made it so much more affordable to be able to have this luxury, which most people didn't have at the time due to cost. So, like, you guys have obviously been very successful as far as bringing on a ton of different clients, right? So,
Sure.
Let's transition that into the proposal side of things that you guys have recently rolled out that I know so many people love. I want to hear all about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're right. I think it did, at the time I was still on the CRM side. I wasn't with Roofr. So it was interesting to watch how Roofr essentially did disrupt the market. I think it was a market that had a couple of big players that kind of had set the market. It was a tool that not everybody was using, but for the guys that were using it, there was, they were the only option, right? And then Roofr comes in, obviously at a better price point with an equivalent product. And, it opened the door for a lot of people to potentially use it in a different way. Like you said, I think a lot of guys were not using the competition or they were only pulling the competition's reports when they got to a certain point in their workflow. Like, we would often see it like, well, I don't pull that until the customer signs a contract because it's too expensive for me to pull that on every job and potentially lose it, right? If I'm only closing a small percentage of those jobs, that's a lot of money over the course of a year going out the door for a small contractor. And I think Roofr comes in, they have these $10 measurements, and now it's like, wait a second, at $10, it's worth it to pull it on every single job, because if I don't land that job, I'm literally out $10, right? Like, so it's not the worst case scenario, right? So, and for that $10, I'm getting a full report. I'm not getting like, something that's just giving me a square count or something like that. So, I don't have to later upgrade it. So there definitely was a lot of advantages there that I think played into Roofr becoming a household name very quickly. And it's kind of one of those things where, like, our goal at Roofr is to offer the best tools possible for the contractor, ultimately because we want the contractor to be able to offer the customer the best customer experience, right? Roofr was founded on working with customers and essentially trying to attach them to a contractor, right? You kind of mate them up, right? And we were kind of like acting as a middleman. And what we realized right away was the experience for the customer was not great. So then we started to build tools that allowed the contractor to offer a better experience. Let everybody have access to these, aerial measurements that are going to streamline their processing, give them a cool PDF to be able to show the customer, hey, here's your house. I pulled these measurements without even coming, right? So it allows me to quote potentially ahead of even getting to you, right? So the next evolution for us obviously was the proposal tool, and giving the contractor a quick and easy way to create a proposal based off of those measurements that they pulled, and being able to make it look really nice, right? Because I think you had some functionality built with a lot of the CRMs where they had integrations with some of these measurement tools, but it's still at the root of it was a very like itemized, bare bones kind of like line item estimate that was just like, hey, take this, apply it to this. It's kicking you out what looks like a glorified Excel spreadsheet, and you get a customer to sign the bottom of it. And we didn't necessarily want to go that way. We wanted it to be more like presentation style, cleaner, very visually appealing for the customer. Give them the ability to add their own story into there, whether that be, an about us section via PDF, photos, whatever the case may be, right? To really like make it more glamorous and stand out from the crowd, but also contain the information and be able to effectively use those measurements that we had become a household name for having. So, that's where the proposal feature kind of came out of. And it's just another step in that direction of trying to, streamline the process for the contractor to ultimately make a better customer experience at the end of it, right? And that's how, for one, that's how you win customers long term. Like in a couple of other podcasts, I've talked about becoming that guy, right? I have that guy, right? I have that mechanic that I go to every time because I trust him. I have that place I go to eat, 2 times a week because I can trust that their food's going to be consistent and be the same every time, right? Where in roofing, I think we think too much around I just need to land this job. If I land this job, then I move on to the next one, rather than I want to build a relationship with this customer that's going to be a long-term relationship to where they're not only going to recommend me to their friends, but they're going to call me back when they have an issue with their own home or they want something else done, right? They need me to, come do the gutters, come do the siding, whatever else I offer, right? And I think that, those are all things that are huge. And I think all of these tools work towards that customer experience, right? Being able to build a proposal that has options on it, right, is something simple, but it allows me to quote not only your roof, but oh, hey, by the way, since I'm here quoting your roof, I also quoted your siding and your gutters. Even though you may want to do those right now you have prices for them, so you can call me later and we can come out and knock those out, right? Mm-hmm. It's an easy way to upsell. It's an easy way for you to stay front of mind for that customer. There's so many things you can do with it. And, so I think that it was just the next logical evolution was to take those measurements and be able to apply them to the estimate and kind of work downstream from there.
How long does it take to create a proposal?
So once you get the system set up, which literally you could set it up, I've set it up in 45 minutes. And that's building, uploading my material in there. I've helped contractors build their material list inside of Roofr. We call it the catalog, and then, create templates based off of the most commonly offered roof systems for their business, whether that be multiple contractors, maybe that be multiple manufacturers' roof systems, or maybe that is different roof systems from a single manufacturer. However you want to do it, you can set up as many templates as you want in there. So to do the catalog, build the templates, you're probably looking at an hour tops. And then once that's in there, you are able to apply that measurement to that proposal. It literally could take probably less than 5 minutes to go from a actual measurement to a proposal that you can send out the door and get signed by a customer. And that's with potentially custom cover images of the customer's house. That's adding photos. If now we have a company cam integration. So if you guys are company cam users and you're taking photos out there in company cam, those are available now to quickly pull and put into your proposal inside of Roofr. So you can have your inspection photos or photos of damage or whatever the case may be that you want to add there to add credibility to that proposal. A lot of what I really like is we have the ability to add PDFs. So a lot of these companies have built an About Us PDF one-pager. They drop that in there so that when I open that proposal, I have my really nice cover image that shows my house, and then the very next page explained to me why I should pick these guys, right? What do I need to know about this company? What's important? What's the reason I choose them over the competition? Then it goes into the nuts and bolts of why, what they're going to actually do on my house, and then my terms and all that stuff. So it's really nice. I love the way that you can easily lay it out. It's so easy to just kind of drag and drop stuff into that proposal. And like I said, once those templates are really dialed in, you're talking a matter of minutes to create a proposal. One of the stories I like to relay is we have a contractor that uses the product and he goes out and does inspections. So one of his things is, hey, we'll do a free roof inspection. So that's kind of his tag, and that's how he gets his hook, right? That's how he gets in the door. So he goes and he does his inspection, and while he's there doing the inspection, he pulls your address up in Roofr, and he pulls up your house, and he quickly sketches out your roof. So Roofr gives you the ability to either have us measure it or to do what we call a DIY and measure it yourself. So he uses the DIY tool. He uses both, but he relies heavily on the DIY tool because he does it right there on the spot. So while he's doing the inspection, he quickly does a DIY. He figures out the measurements of the roof, and then he goes back to the truck and he rolls all that information that he just got from his 20-minute inspection and his DIY. He pushes them right into a proposal, and he walks right back up to the front door and says, hey, I know you only called me out here to do a quick free inspection, but while I was here, I went ahead, I pulled a measurement on your house, I went ahead and created a proposal. Here it is. Let's walk through it really quick. Oh, you like it? Click here, sign now, done, right? And it's what was a free inspection that got him in the door is now a signed proposal, and he moves on from there, and it goes straight to production. So, it's genius use of it. And the product just has so much versatility in that way. Like we have another contractor that uses it at home shows, right? He puts up a big screen TV behind him and he says, hey, give me your address. They give him their address. He plugs it in. He pulls it up on the screen. He draws their house really quick, hits a button, rolls it into a template that he has. And, look, this is how much it would cost for me to come roof your house. Really? Okay, cool. Like, we need a new roof. That's awesome. Okay, cool. Sign right here, right? And he's closing tons of jobs at the home show without ever setting foot on their property. Like, it's amazing, right? So the use cases are there to do so many versatile things with it. And, it's just, I love to hear stories of like how guys are using it and how effectively it's working for them. Cause you find out so many different ways, like things that we don't even necessarily think of that you just say like, that's genius, right? Like the home show thing, that's genius. I would have never thought of the use case like that. But it's just an absolutely genius way to use the product.
Yeah. I like that, the home show. And just so, for y'all that are listening, Pete's telling you that if you do this, you're going to close every single person that comes to your booth. So make sure you're doing it with Roofr.
Get it. Hey, maybe if the proposal's pretty enough, you never know, right?
Well, and it's a really, I think sometimes people overlook like presentation value, right? And not just in this instance, like in general, like how things are framed in the presentation of it really do matter as far as, especially when it comes to like people making decisions and such decisions that are $10, $15, $20, $25,000 decisions. I think it's a really prudent thing to do to make sure that you've got some sort of clean proposals getting out in front of your customers quickly, because the other side of that is perception's reality. So when Pete's neighbor had to wait 4 or 5 days, for all Pete knows, that guy could have came back a week later and done a really good job. But the odds are he's
Absolutely.
not going to, right? Like you gotta, like there's a really strong likelihood that that's not the case, and we'll never know because that guy never had the opportunity to earn the business, because people will take indicators that you give them and make decisions based off of those, right? So, well,
and it goes, like you said, it goes beyond the proposal to like, you're a website guy, right? Like you're an SEO guy. Like I think that, I love when you go to people's websites, and you like, it's like your face, right? Like if I go to your website and it looks like crap, like, like your uncle built it in his basement with, on some free crap that he had, like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm going to be like, what the hell is this? This is garbage. Like, this is not a professional company. Like, this is some Mickey Mouse shit, right? Like, as opposed to going to a website and you're like, wow, this is a clean ass website. Like, these guys are professional looking, right? Like the about us section is good. Like, I feel like I know these guys already. Like, this is cool, right? And I think that, so much of that stuff goes a long way, and it translates to your proposal, right? Like, if your proposal is really professional looking and really clean and very visual, I'm going to like it before I even see the price, as opposed to, hey, here's my napkin from Chick-fil-A. I flipped it over and wrote a number on the back. Are you good with this? Right? Like, it's like, you know what I mean? Like, that's obviously not going to sell me quite as hard as like a really nice, like PDF style, clean looking proposal with a lot of pictures and stuff. Right. So, sure. I think it goes a long way, talking about, like you said, the perception of it when I see it, right? Like if it's visually pleasing right off the bat, like you've already got me hooked to where I'm probably going to read into this way more than, you just kind of giving me some stuff you printed off a Word or wrote on the back of a napkin, right? So it's, it definitely makes you stand out from the crowd for sure.
Yeah, no doubt. What kind of changes do you see forthcoming in the next year, 3 years, 5 years that are going to make an impact in the roofing community?
Man, that's an awesome question. I think the thing that I've, now I've only been on the SaaS side of the business, on the tech side of the business for now close to 5 years, right? Probably. But, it's amazing to me in those 5 years how far the industry has come, right? From not only the tools that we have, but the quality of those tools, how much some of those existing tools that were, maybe the first ones in the door, how much they've improved or how much their competition has potentially improved, and how much more we have to offer the contractor. It's amazing to me. I think the AI piece now that's coming into the market on some of these softwares will definitely play a huge role. I don't know if you've seen the tool RoofHawk, like, not to give them a shameless plug, but they're one of the first like really like AI tools that I've seen come out that's just like wow, this is incredible. Like, this is like the future of where our industry is going and how it's going to streamline the way people do things that traditionally took a lot of time and, potentially had that human error factor. Like, could we start to minimize that, and how much AI will come in, potentially to creating proposals and ordering material and, material dropping and those type of things, like how much of it will be powered by AI as we go. My favorite piece, I think the one thing that I'm really looking forward to seeing evolve in the roofing industry over the next couple of years is the kind of the merger, I think, of solar and roofing, right? I think the solar shingle is really going to turn a corner to where it's going to take two very separate industries that, have been kind of at odds with each other, right? Like almost contingent on each other, but kind of at odds, like, I'm a solar guy and I could land so many more jobs if I just had dependable roofers to do all this roofing work prior to me, punching it full of holes and putting a solar panel on, right? So it's like, so you've got these two industries that are very, very separated from each other and have their own set of tools that have developed over time, right? And now you're starting to see this crossover where the solar shingle and the idea that, hey, potentially the same company that installed your roof could be the company coming back 5 years later to install your solar roof, right? And it's like, that's going to change everything, right? Because now there won't be a need for these big solar companies because your local roofer will be able to do the same thing, right? But it'll also cause a huge evolution in the tools, right? Like my tools that are measurement tools will have to be able to help potentially locate solar panels, right? Or my proposal tools will have to be able to accommodate not just the roof, but the solar install, right? And so there's a lot of things that will have to morph over time in the industry to incorporate it, but I think it will be for the best, ultimately, because I think both industries have great tools, that are very specific to their industry, and I think the kind of the merger of those tools and the merger of those two industries will be very interesting to watch, and I think you see it already with some of these huge companies like GAF. I think of, having its own its own separate company, GAF Energy, that is focused on that next step, right? And if a company that big is saying like, hey, we see this as the future of roofing, so we're going to build a whole organization around it and start to roll this out, says a lot, about where they think the market is going. And it really, I think, drives home the fact that ultimately this is going to be one giant industry. Like, we're not going to be two very distinct separate industries with our own set of tools.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And I love the friction that you kind of bring up between, like solar and just traditional roofs, right? And the guys that are involved within it. And it's almost like it's almost like the friction or contention that's between like a sales and marketing department, right? Like if you gave us better leads, we'd close more. Right. Well, if you close more jobs, like our marketing would be doing much better. And there's always kind of like that finger pointing and a little bit of contention.
Yeah. Well, and I think, ultimately over time, what's happened is you've developed, you're at the root of it, your roofers are your installers, right? Like that's ultimately their bread and butter. They're production guys. They do sales, but they don't necessarily love it, right? Like at the heart of it, they probably started nailing shingles on a roof, and they've evolved over time to just have like a great reputation, which essentially has allowed them to build a company. Yep. Where your solar guys are not installers. Your solar guys are giant sales engines, right? And I think that's where a lot of the friction comes from, is that you have the production guys and you have your sales mega machines over here just, mass selling solar. And I think that's why it leaves a bad taste in the roofer's mouth, right? Because they're like, do I really want to be associated with this like sales machine that really doesn't give a crap necessarily about the customer? They just want to make the sale, where I'm more like developing the relationship and hoping to become a long-term roofer and blah, blah, blah. So I think that's where a lot of the friction is from. So it'll be very interesting to see how it kind of like comes together and how it changes the industry, because I think, having a product that is a solar product that now a roofing company can easily learn to install will change the game for the roofer, right? And it will allow them to compete with the solar company. So then the solar company is going to have to obviously do the same thing and start to incorporate more roofing into it. And we see it already. Like, we have companies reach out all the time in regards to our products and say like, hey, we're a solar company looking to get more into roofing. You guys are very entrenched in roofing. How can we potentially work together? Right. So everybody's already seeing the writing on the wall and trying to kind of figure out how do we meld these two together. And I think it's obviously going to be the future of the industry, is like, and just, society in general, I think is going to move more towards a more energy efficient way of living. So solar roofing is going to become more and more prevalent, and, and really drive that, I think.
Yeah, that's you never disappoint me, Pete. I'll tell you, with the insights, man. So you guys have got a lot of great things going on. We touched on a lot of them. So if somebody is wanting to get in touch with you or explore options that Roofr has for them that can help their business, how would they go about, reaching out to you guys?
Yeah, it's a great thing. If you go to our website, you have really two options there. You can register for a free account and get started, right? And that's a great way to kind of test the waters with us. You get a couple of free reports to pull. You get 5 free proposals to try out if you want to take the time and set that up and try it and run it head to head against what you guys are currently doing. You have that option in there. We've added that to the free version. So, but I always say the best way to see the value is to talk to somebody, right? Like, get on a call, get on a demo with one of our sales guys, and let him walk through what you guys are currently doing, and then walk you through how Roofr can potentially help that process, right? Because ultimately, at the end of the day, that's what we want to do. Like, think of us not as sales guys, but more so as consultants that want to take a look at your business and see where can we plug Roofr in to potentially solve some problems for you, right? To fill some holes, to streamline things a little bit more, right? And potentially make your process better. And that's ultimately what we want to do at Roofr. So I always suggest, it's great to jump on and register and pull a measurement and compare it to what you're currently doing. But ultimately, at the end of the day, get on the call with somebody, with a sales guy, and walk through your process and see where we can help, and let us, like I always say, like, I think one of the most underutilized group of people are sales and success people in the roofing industry, because you got to remember, like, as a roofer, I'm seeing just my business day to day, right?
Right.
That success person that's onboarding and training, he could be seeing 5 or 6 roofers a day, right? Like, he could be seeing 60 to 30 to 50 contractors a week. He's in their accounts. He's seeing how they run their business. He's seeing what works, what doesn't work, right? And so he becomes a fantastic resource and very underutilized, right? So get on the call with those guys and run it by them. Say, hey, here's my process. What do you guys see? Like, what do you guys think you could help me with, right? Maybe it's nothing. Maybe you have a fantastic process and we're like, you're killing it. Like, there's nothing we can do, right? Or you're killing it, but maybe we could upgrade it a little bit by doing this, right? Or, hey, here's some things that we could do that would drastically, like this guy I talked to you earlier, right? Like, if we can get it set up to where he can utilize our aerial imagery, he's spending 2-3 hours on a single job just measuring and quoting, right? Like, if we can reduce that down to a matter of minutes for him, the time savings and cost savings for him over the course of a week will be like insane, right? Like, it'll just be ridiculous, right? So, and that's the kind of guys we really want to help with, right? And we can help everybody, but those are the guys, like, that's a life-changing event for him, right? Like, like he said, I'm sweating my ass off on a roof, 10 roofs a week. Like, that's a lot of time standing up on the roof, pulling measurements with 100-foot tape. It's a pain in the ass, right? And if I can take that and reduce it to an hour or 2 a week for him, and he can do it from his desk, I just literally changed that dude's life, right? Like, it's not so much even about the amount of time that I save. Like, he's going to love me for the fact that he doesn't have to climb up on a roof anymore, right? So it's like, getting with us and just saying, like, hey, here's my pain points. Yep. Is there a way Roofr can help out, and what can you guys do to help me? Like, that's a huge piece of it. So, like, I would suggest go to the website, jump on a demo, schedule some time with us, and just run through it and see what there is. Like, see what the options are.
Nice. Yeah, that's awesome, man. If there's one piece of advice before we wrap up today for a roofing company, based on your entire history and experience, what would it be? It could have to do with any part of the business.
Yeah, I would say Find things that work for you, right? And I think it goes back to the CRM conversation is, yeah, there's tons, the industry is flooded now with, products and, all of these new things coming out, and there's, even CRMs, right? Like if I want a CRM, now there's a ton of options, like where there used to be like one or two, now there's probably 10 different options for a CRM. There's tons of measurement tools. There's tons of, SEO. There's tons of everything now in the industry. And it's like, do your homework, right? But find the one that really fits your business the best. Don't try to change the way you do business and mold the business to a piece of tech, right? Take your workflow, really dial it in, figure out what your process is at the heart of it, right? How you want your company to run, and then find the pieces of technology that just improve on that. That's it, right? We're not trying to reinvent the wheel by bringing in technology. Like we're just literally, some people can do it with two pieces of technology. I know guys that have company cam for photos and a CRM, and that's all they need. And it's like changed the way they do business. And I know guys like our buddy John Broche, who John's got more tech under the shout out to John for what he does. And he's a guru at it. Like he makes that shit work for him, but man, that dude's got a ton of tech, right? That's not for everybody. Like not everybody needs 8 platforms to get through the day. John is the master of it. He's figured out how to make those 8 platforms communicate with each other to make an unbelievable world-class experience for the customer and for his team internally. But is that necessary for my business? Probably not, right? Like I could probably do it with considerably less, right? So I think that's a big part of it, right? Like don't go crazy. Don't think you need all these things, right? Dial in your process, see where the holes are, plug in a piece of tech that really solves that problem for you and fixes that pain point, and then find the next opportunity and do it again, right? And you may find that there may only be 2 or 3 opportunities. You may find that there's 10, right? You may look for a piece of tech that covers more than one of those opportunities, an all-in-one platform or something like that, right? So, but I think that you want to find the tech that's really just going to supplement what you're already doing and just make it better. You don't want to necessarily mold your business to the tech, right? And that would be my biggest word of advice is, to figure out your process first. Like that's the key, right? Figure out what your process is, right? Don't get on a CRM and then try to figure it out, because the CRM is going to fail if you don't even know what the process is when you go into it, right? So figure out the process first, get everybody accustomed to that, right? Be able to relay that to your team easily, right? Like being able to put it down on, write your process down on a piece of paper. If you can't write it down on a piece of paper, something's up, right? Like you don't have a process. Like it should be easy for me to take it and say, okay, this is our process. This is the flow that every single customer should hypothetically go through in our business, right? That should be an easy thing to do. And if it's not, then you've got some holes there to start with, right? So get that process dialed in and then figure out what tech best supplements it. That would be my biggest word of advice.
And great advice it is, my friend. Look, honored to have had the chance to speak with you today. Thanks for stopping by. I'm sure there's a ton of value for a lot of different people here, and I'm sure they appreciate it just as much as I do. Thank you.
Oh man, thanks for having me. It's been awesome. It's a great conversation. Like I said, I could talk about this stuff all day. So, I love it, and I love that we're able to go in and help the contractors. Like being someone that came ultimately from the field in the beginning, right? I saw that side of it, and I know how tough it is just sometimes to get through the day, not having things like material and stuff not built correctly, and the designer the architect is a jackass and all this stuff. Like, you're dealing with all kinds of stuff out there in the field. The last thing you want to worry about is whether your process is failing, right? So it's like all of these tools are going to help really to help you along the way with that. And, I see the value in it so much, and I love to be able to convey that value to the contractor because I was there. I mean, I know how hard it is to be out there on a daily basis and see shit fall apart, right? So it's like, it's really nice to be able to say, hey, this is going to solve that problem for you and make a huge difference in your week. So
yeah, there's no doubt about it. And don't worry, we'll have another chat with Pete down the road, part 2. So stay tuned.
There you go.
But until then, thank you very much, Pete. Stay well, my friend.
All right, thank you, man.